If you're like me, you've seen all the classic monster films by this point. So much so that you've probably dug deeper. Maybe you've checked out Universal Films' C and D list films as well. Checked out the monster films made by, Poverty Row companies. You've seen it all and you're hungry for more. Well, if that's the case, how does a film involving a secret military experiment, the Yakuza, a sad clown, and a shocking amount of sadism for the time period sound to you? Let's take a look at 1954's Invisible Avenger from Japan. I don't know where to start with this film. It's definitely different. And part of that definitely comes from the fact that it's a different culture that tells stories differently, so it's not going to follow the predictable route we're used to. But it's also just a very, very strange film. And I would argue also a very good film. Produced by Toho Studios in 1954, this is the same company and the same year that they produced Godzilla. And I would argue The Invisible Avenger possesses a similar balance of fanciful imagination, strangeness, and stark, realistic drama all at the same time. Where to start? How about the opening scene? Whereas most horror films kind of begin quietly and build slowly, the first scene is surprising. It begins with a man driving a car who runs over something. Gets out of the car in the middle of the road to see who or what he's run over. An entire crowd forms around to find out why he's stopped, and there is nothing there. Okay, he hit the Invisible Man. We can all figure that part out. What's surprising in 1954 is the way they discover this is you start seeing a bunch of blood pooling and collecting underneath the car before a man's naked body, you can't see anything, appears above it. And that's our introduction to the entire film. So the Invisible Man is dead. We're going to go back in time and learn who he was and what happened, right? Nope. Instead, he left a suicide note. This was on purpose, and he explains that he was part of a military experiment that turned him invisible, couldn't turn him back, and he, like many other invisible men out there, just didn't know how to function in society without being visible. And best off, the letter is addressed to his one surviving friend, who is also an invisible man and has had the courage to keep living. Welcome to a film that is all about the world already knowing there's another invisible man out there and desperately trying to find him before he does something horrific. Hooked yet? It gets better! So while we're watching, the government and the people freak out over this invisible man who's out there, who could hurt or kill anyone at a moment's notice, walk into banks. It feels a lot like the first X-Men film from 1999, actually, in that respect. And we get more backstory too and find out the other invisible men have all conveniently died. There's only one left out there, but where is he and what is he up to? While we're trying to piece this together, following the story of a young reporter trying to make his name and solve and crack this story, we're also introduced to a nightclub singer who is dealing with a very violent, abusive boss who very brutally attempts to rape her in an early scene. Figuring out her story and how it relates to all this, there's also a sweet, blind girl who lives with her grandfather in an apartment across the way, and you know she's going to be important later in the story because she can sense people without seeing them and also sense their auras, whether they're good or evil. Interesting stuff. There's a sad clown that checks in her from time to time who just seems like the sweetest, most downtrodden guy on earth, and you're waiting for him to figure into this. And there's an entire group of invisible men pulling off robberies across the country, claiming that you shouldn't mess with them because they're invisible. Yeah, maybe that part doesn't make too much sense. Anyway, there's a whole lot going on, and you're grasping at straws trying to make sense of where all this is going, how it figures in, and who the real invisible man is. Well, one of those pieces works out the way you expect it to. The rest maybe not. You've probably already figured out, if you've been paying attention from what I've said so far, the most likely candidate for who the real invisible man is and what he's up to. He's the sad clown. How else do you exist in the company of other people without people realizing you're invisible than by wearing full makeup? And he's not a villain. He's not a monster. He is just trying to exist by working a day-to-day job advertising for a nightclub that's conveniently owned by the Yakuza, who are the people who are committing these invisible man robberies, and the boss is the guy who's been forcibly trying to rape the star singer. It all begins to connect. What follows is interesting. It's well directed. It's well acted. There's a lot of dramatic tension to it. It rarely ever feels silly. And while the Invisible Man effects come late in the film, There are plenty of them once we get there, and they're really good for the time period. Japan was apparently obsessed with the Invisible Man back in the 1950s. They did a first film in 1949, a sequel to that film in 1957. This one's unrelated to those other two. It's the same special effects guy, but otherwise totally unrelated film and a far more interesting film. But man, do they really know how to make those special effects work. It might not look great from a 2024 standpoint, but I can tell you growing up as a kid, it would have been so much fun having this film to watch on broadcast TV. So many scenes are just exciting to watch, and you kind of have to wonder how they pulled this all off with a little bit of piano wire and some double exposure trickery. It's really good. And of course, the most lovable part of the entire film ends up being the Invisible Man himself, a guy who has the power to do just about anything and chooses instead to be a poor, downtrodden clown who visits a poor little blind girl every single day and ultimately has to stand up and do what's right for the sake of everyone. It's a good film. It's not exactly a horror film. Then again, Invisible Agent, part of the Universal Invisible Man franchise, wasn't really a horror film either. In fact, you could argue maybe even the original Invisible Man wasn't really a horror film. It was just a story of a supernatural or scientifically created guy doing horrible things. What is a horror film? This probably isn't one. And yet it has chilling moments. It has moments that are shocking, that are over-the-top cruel, that pull on your heartstrings, and, while the Invisible Man's final revenge against the Yakuza crime bosses isn't scary per se, it's over-the-top and a lot of fun. So, if you're looking for a film that's going to scare you, this is not it. But if you're looking for a film that is incredibly interesting, different, quality, and just strange bizarre, Invisible Avenger from 1954 is definitely where you want to go. By the way, not to be confused with the 1958 film, which is an American film completely unrelated to this and definitely not of the horror or chiller genre. Invisible Avenger, 1954 Japan. Check it out. The only real way to find this film that I am aware of is from the Internet Archive. Link below. Check it out. You can see the whole film with a subtitle translation beneath as well. It's definitely worth your watch. I hope you enjoy. If you like it, please leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. Even if you didn't like it, I want to hear what you think. If you're looking for more content, please hit like and subscribe. It helps our channel tremendously. And of course, if you're looking for intelligent discourse with people who are respectful, friendly, knowledgeable, and actually want to get to know you as a person, check us out at classiccomics.org, where we have lots of conversation going on and lots of friendly folks who want to know you better than those people you're finding in Facebook groups. Until next time, have a great one. Watch this film. Stay weird.